Hello, and welcome once again to Neurologic. I'm your host, Leo Jones. Today's episode comes with a warning. The topics discussed will be bleak, daunting, and in some ways upsetting. I advise caution when listening. Before I begin, though, I wanted to preview next month's episodes. As some of you may be aware, April is Autism Acceptance Month, and April 2nd known as Autism Acceptance Day. For many, it's more common to exchange acceptance for awareness, both semantically and figuratively. However, for myself and other autistics, awareness isn't enough. Awareness doesn't change how we are treated, awareness doesn't ensure equality, and it sure as hell doesn't end the lies and stereotypes about what being autistic actually means. So, to celebrate Autism Acceptance Month, Neurologic will be posting more episodes than normal, talking about autistic women, intersectionality, non-speaking autistics, and much more. Guests include both autistic and neurotypical individuals. I highly recommend you listen and listen often. Visit the Neurologic website at neurologic.libsyn.com, share episodes on your preferred social network, and even leave us a message or two on our Facebook page or via email. With that covered, let's get to the topic of this episode. Death of an autistic. Over the past couple of weeks, I ran into a couple of articles, one opinion and one news. Both serve as motivation for what I'm talking about today. First, I'd like to introduce you to John Worthington. John Worthington was a 32-year-old man living in the UK who was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, which now falls under the umbrella of autism spectrum disorder, or ASD. He also had a speech impediment and other comorbid disabilities. He was an electrician and a former nightclub manager who, according to his father, liked to fix things, saying he was one of those people who was intelligently brilliant and superb with his hands. I refer to him in past tense because John Worthington took his life last year on August 11th. John struggled less with his disabilities and more with the National Health Service's Mental Health Division, calling their 111 line frequently, seeing his doctor 29 times in 1 year, and even having to wait 5 months for a psychological assessment after 2 referrals from his doctor, among other obstacles that prevented John from getting the care he was desperately seeking. On June 6th of last year, after expressing suicidal thoughts since 2014, John called the 111 line 4 times, committing suicide on his last call. His facial tics, related to his functional facial movement disorder, meant he often struggled to speak. The line operators hung up on him twice. During one call, according to transcripts, he told the call handler, "You're terminating the call because you are not patient enough to listen to his speech impediment." His father said of John's experience, he wanted answers on why he felt the way he did. Everything was so slow. Ultimately, I do not think mental health teams did enough. I don't usually talk about stories like this. They depress me. They make me feel helpless. It's part of why I've never been a big fan of the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network's Disability Day of Mourning. From where I stand, we cannot bring back the dead. And there are so many that died not of natural causes. But what really disturbs me about this story, what gnaws inside and never seems to go away, is that this could have been me. Why not me? How did I survive? What did I do differently that led me down this path? The answers aren't clear. Mental health services aren't really any better here in the States, and depending on where you live and your wealth, or lack thereof, they're oftentimes worse. John Worthington died around my age, and the positive things said about him mirror ones said about me. It's not much to assume that others like me, perhaps even some of you listening, might find commonality in John's experience. How many others are like him? How many have taken themselves out after years of futile efforts and frustration with an incompetent, underfunded, backlogged, overworked healthcare system? John's death, sadly, is not alone. In fact, according to the second article that got my attention, entitled "To Neurotypicals on My 36th Birthday," author Sarah Kerchak cites a study published last year from the American Journal of Public Health that found that autistic people die at an average age of 36. As she continues, not all studies on autism and mortality can agree on the average age of our deaths. So if you think I'm being overly dramatic by picking the youngest one, there are some other recent studies with more positive results. By positive, though, I mean studies that didn't determine that 36 was the average age of mortality in autism, but just found that we die significantly earlier than our non-autistic counterparts. Now, obviously, the average age of mortality for us isn't solely due to suicide, but also includes injury and comorbid disabilities, such as epilepsy. But the rate of depression among autistics is high, and the stress of living autistic in a neurotypical world is substantial. According to a recent research paper published in the Journal of Abnormal Child Psychology, nearly half of adults with autism will experience clinical depression in their lifetime. Diagnosing depression in autistics is difficult, they added, because depression and autism share common symptoms. For example, difficulty with social relationships. Regarding stress, another paper published 2 years ago in Autism Res discovered that stress among autistic adults was higher than those without, and was more specifically tied to social interaction. Quote, findings indicate that adults with ASD experience greater perceived and interviewer-observed stress than healthy volunteers, and that stress is significantly related to social functioning in adults with autism spectrum disorder. The stress you feel is real. It's not in your head. It's not made up. And neither is your depression. Your perceptions are correct. Don't let others tell you you're making it up, or you're being a drama queen, which in itself is also a little sexist. You are perceiving things correctly. The stress you are feeling is not self-created. John Worthington certainly felt it. Consider that as autistics, we are 9 times more likely to commit suicide. And then ask yourself just why that is happening. As autistics, the stress we perceive is real, and so is the depression that comes along with it. The feeling that no matter what you do, you can never get ahead, where social interaction is so difficult and fraught with tripwires and landmines that no one is either able or willing to point out to you. A consistent wave of sensory overload and insults camouflaged as compliments with clandestine prejudice, crashing into you every day. We don't want to die. But too many are seriously questioning an existence that feels less like a life and more like a prison, where every day is either an exercise in deception of one's true self, or being judged, stigmatized, stereotyped, isolated, and without the tools needed to survive in a society that is inherently hostile to autistics. My point is, our deaths are not because of autism itself, nor the symptoms that it may come with. It's because, crudely, of the shit we have to live with. Why would you want to stick around in a place where your entire being is rejected? Where you're not listened to, and you're barely acknowledged? Where the things that other people do to improve their lives seemingly just don't work for you, or you're told that you can't even do them simply because of their perception of what autism is. Now, sure, there are a variety of charities that have the word autism in their name and talk about how they're going to help autistics deal with these things, but too often autistics aren't even control these organizations, or we are frequently used as tokens as our legitimate concerns are acknowledged, then summarily dismissed. Sarah Kerchak, in her article, takes the words right out of my mouth. Quote, "I'm tired of watching people who aren't on the spectrum tell shitty versions of our stories, while I can't find the funding or the audience for my own. I'm tired of watching people get feels and inspiration from shows like The Good Doctor, while they can't seem to give a shit about autistic people in real life. I am so sick of watching people pay lip service to the value of autistic life while funding research into prenatal testing for autism at one end and supporting euthanasia for autism on the other, all in the name of preventing suffering. As if that's not exactly the kind of thing that makes a person feel about 9 times less worthy of existence than someone who isn't wondering if their birth should have been prevented, or if they should legally peace out before they become too much of a burden on their loved ones." End quote. It's articles like this about John Worthington and pieces written by Sarah Kerchak that make me want to rage. Yet this is not new. It's been going on for a long time. But if it's new to you, perhaps it's worth your time to actually talk to an autistic person. Check out autistic created media, and quit listening to neurotypical voices that too often overrule autistic ones. For my fellow autistics, realize you're not alone, even though it seems like it. There are thousands of us going through the same thing, but we have been conditioned to think we're the exception out of the entirety of humanity. Suicide isn't going to make anyone feel better, nor will it fix what's supposedly broken. That isn't you. You are not broken. You are not wrong. You are not defective, diseased, or whatever other adjectives are used to cover up the fact that others fear and reject you simply because you don't function the way they do. I don't feel like I have a lot of advice for how to cope with suicidal thoughts and depression. I'm extremely fortunate to have people surrounding me that actually genuinely care about my well-being. They're able to accept who I am, and they have the ability to tell me when I've committed a faux pas or social error, as well as how to avoid it or at least fix my mistake while not labeling me as some sort of horrible person or trying to fix what is my true self. It matters a lot to have people in your life that are willing to work with you. Not because they're paid to, not because they're your family, and not because they're doing it for college credit or because someone else's parents told them to, but because they genuinely like you. They value you as a person. They see you as an equal part of their lives. Too often, we're not even met halfway when we really do try. When we suppress our anxieties just to go to a party or some sort of gathering. It would be really nice if neurotypicals would meet us halfway and understand that we are trying to exist in your world, but it is extremely difficult to do so. That being said, however, I have advice for neurotypicals. Invest in us. Actually pay for us to speak at your conferences or events, rather than expecting that we'll do it for free. We are experts of our own disability, yet we are treated more like lab exhibits by professionals too focused on pipe dream cures or treatments to transform us into something resembling a societal standard of normal interaction. Research ways to make our lives more tolerable and accessible, not just for autistic children, but for autistic adults as well. Tell us you're interested in what we have to say, that we don't drain you, that we're not a burden, but someone you enjoy having around, and that you're glad we're alive. Then show us that through your actions. And, as Sarah Kerchak wrote, then act like it. I'm Leo Jones, and this has been Neurologic. Neurologic is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. To view a copy of this license, visit creativecommons.org/by-nc-nd/4.0 or send a letter to Creative Commons, P.O. Box 1866, Mountain View, California 94042, USA. Neurologic uses the song Furious Freak, created by Kevin MacLeod, for its intro and outro music. Visit him at incompetech.com. Furious Freak is licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license, creativcommons.org/licenses/by/3.0. You can reach Leo Jones and Neurologic by email at neurologicpodcast@gmail.com.